Hello, welcome to Archive in 2026 presentation. Welcome, thank you for joining us on this sunny UK day. I'm Mark Risby, I'm the MD and CTO here at Boxer. Been working with our colleagues here at Telestream and Disk Archive Corporation for quite a few years, quite a lot of years when it comes to Telestream, getting on for 30 now, I think. We have a lot of history here, and again, we sometimes forget as time goes on that things have changed. And we talk about archive in different ways, and we've realised, I guess, where we are now, archive is perhaps not what it was. To some of you, archive is your backup. It's a way of moving storage around, keeping a spare copy of it, perhaps for a much longer time period. And for others, it's for optimizing your storage. If we go back in the day for broadcast transmission servers, it was a way of keeping things off the really expensive transmission servers and migrating it on and off of other storage just in time to keep the value right across the whole chain. But it's so much more than that now, and we are using archive to mean different things. So we just wanted, I guess, to address the different ways that the term's being used. Here we're going to be talking about format obsolescence, repatriation from cloud, data sovereignty, monetization of content, of course, and ransomware. We'll take a look at what those things mean. So first of all, format obsolescence. Well, formats aren't around forever, and that includes data. I put this up. If you're a person of a certain age from the UK, you may or may not remember this. When I was at senior school, we did a project called the Doomsday Project, where we remade the Doomsday book, and it was decided to put them on Laserdisc because this was the format of the future. The whole system fitted on 2 Laserdiscs, and I think there is now one system in the world that will play it, which is this one here. It's available at the Computer Museum in Cambridge if any of you want to go and see what you did. I did go and see what I did at school, and it was very depressing. Repatriation from cloud. Again, I'm only going to touch on the headlines here, but really we are now seeing a lot more attention paid to the costs of cloud. We are absolutely not saying that cloud does not have a place. There are many appropriate places where the cloud fits really, really well. But what we're also, I guess, understanding and saying out loud is that some operations are very expensive to cloud, especially with storage. So it's a case of understanding your needs. And what we're seeing now is a case of businesses looking across their entire organization, adding up all of those little bits of storage costs that they're spending in the cloud and understanding whether that's good value for money or not. Data sovereignty is probably a topic a few years ago I would never expect to be talking about. There are people at the moment who are actively trying to understand what it is if America turns off access to AI and cloud services to the rest of the world. And we know it's already happened. There have been cases under the US Cloud Act where they've turned off connectivity to a couple of countries. So we are seeing a big interest now from certain groups to look at where their data actually is, and people are paying much more attention to it. Excuse me, are there EU or UK data centers? What are the connectivity? What are the options, and who controls it? These are things that we just weren't looking at that long ago. And of course, monetization of content. This is the main thing we've talked about in archive for a number of years. How do we make more money off the stuff we've got? Essentially, that's not going anywhere. We are seeing now that there are more opportunities. There are more places to view your material. We're seeing the value of material change depending on particularly metadata, and that's not changing. Also, and finally here, ransomware attacks. We put this up. There's some data here that our friends at Trusted Partner Network have helped with. Q1 of this year saw more security alerts than the whole of 2025. This is an area where we are seeing an increased amount of activity on every level. AI is at the minute making things harder, not easier. 1 in 5 breaches now involve API tools or unmanaged AI in places, and the threats are moving faster than the fixes. We're seeing people deploy AI code that's fixing problems very, very quickly, but also bringing in new security holes at the same time. And it's such a fast-moving area that the security can't keep up. And we know that the media and entertainment sector is a higher risk than most others. We have a lot of third-party production pipelines. We're very intrinsically linked with our partners. We have high-value content. That pre-release content has a very high value if it's leaked, and a globally distributed workflow. But this I thought was an interesting factor. You can compare different amounts that breaches might cost, and you're looking anywhere from a few tens of thousands up to millions for a breach. But this I think is an interesting stat when you look at the difference in scale. So this is basically saying that the single biggest factor on surviving a ransomware attack is whether or not your backup is compromised. In the median in this case, if the backup was compromised, it was $3 million to recover versus 375,000 when they survived. That's a huge difference. So having a viable backup is incredibly important. The point here as well, we are saying that the attackers also go after your backup, go after your archive if they can. And over half the time they try, they succeed. Encrypted backup, encrypted archive means you don't have anywhere to go. So understanding how these things fit are very interesting and very important. And key to this, I guess, now is that we're seeing organizations able to find other sources of funding within their own business because they're looking at business risk rather than it being a media problem. So there's a little summary of what we're going to be talking about. I'm going to hand over to Mark Andrews at DAC, who's the Business Development Director for Europe.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. It's great to be here. So my name is Mark Andrews from Disk Archive Corporation. Unfortunately, I couldn't be in the studio. I'm actually based in Amsterdam, though Disk Archive is a UK company. I sort of hang out in the Netherlands. But what I wanted to talk about, so hopefully you see my screen. I just start, yes. So though I'm here representing Disk Archive, we wanted to make the webinar a little bit more interesting and try and make it a bit more educational. So there were three topics I wanted to talk about. One was best practices for long-term digital preservation. Obviously, your archive it can be quite sizable. And obviously, you keep it 5, 10, 15 in perpetuity for a long period of time. So you want to ensure that your data survives that. We are also talking with a lot of our customers right now, sort of broadcasters, production houses, media companies, where in the past they put a lot on the cloud, and now they're looking at repatriation or declouding, as we call it. So we'll talk a bit about that and the business case behind it. And also a little bit about cybersecurity. Mark mentioned ransomware. Of course, how do we get around this? So a little bit about me. I've been in storage since 1990s. I've seen it a lot come and go in that time. Just to give you an example of a system I sold back in the mid-90s to a major insurance company. It's a document management system. It was 3 terabytes of content, mostly tape-based, and we sold that for £275,000. Now, if you compare that to what a 30 terabyte disk that you can get in this day and age, we're talking sort of £500. So a lot has changed. So obviously storage is constantly evolving. It's constantly innovating. We have a whole array of different storage platforms that we can use, from disk to tape. We have something called MAID, which is what actually Alto is, a massive array of independent disk, solid state. There's a whole range of storage to choose from, and obviously now we have cloud. So what is the best choice for you as an archivist? And so that's some of the things we're going to talk about today. So the first topic, best practices for long-term digital preservation. I want to talk a bit about the 3-2-1 strategy, eliminating vendor lock-in. Mark talked about the BBC and those laser discs. The last thing you want to do is, if you have an archive, is to have to go and find a local friendly museum in order to read your content back. And a bit about open systems as well, which is more about sort of the format obsolescence that we talked about earlier. So the 3-2-1 data archiving strategy, what is that? So basically, it's 3 copies of data on 2 separate storage vendors with at least 1 copy offsite. So as an example, so the salesman in me, I wasn't going to make this a product pitch, I am going to compare it to Alto, to Disk Archives, our product Alto, which actually stands for Alternative to LTO. So within Alto, we could make 2 copies of data. We could do a replica. And then you might have a third copy on LTO tape and move that off to tape. Move that off to shelf. Alternatively, you might have a single copy in Alto. You might have a tape library, an existing tape library that you want to sweat. So, okay, let's put a copy on the tape library. And then actually, maybe we then have a cloud as well. So then we're going to talk about repatriation of cloud. We're not saying cloud's a bad thing, but perhaps used rather than putting all your eggs in one basket in the cloud, there are alternative solutions as well. So 3-2-1 data archiving. Avoiding vendor lock-in. So you might think as an archivist, how do I mitigate against, I really like this startup company. I want to buy their technology, but I worry they go out of business. What can I do about that? But actually, it's not just the startups we need to worry about. Some of the major vendors like Sony with their the Petasite that they had, a lot of people invested a lot of money in those systems. It's now end of life. Storage Tech gets acquired by Oracle, the T10,000 tape drives, end of life. And all of a sudden, this has put some major broadcasters in some real urgent situations where they now have to migrate content off those systems. And we're not talking a small amount of content, we're talking a massive amount of content. And the problem with Sony, for example, the spares on the lasers and that kind of thing, they're really hard to come by. So you could be in a situation where, yeah, I've got the optical disc platter. Yeah, I've been told this can last 100 years. But if you don't have the tape drives to read it, then you've lost your content in effect. Open independence. So this is at Disk Archive. We're really promoting a hybrid model. So again, the sales in me, I'd love you to buy Disk Archive and put everything on Alto. But actually, that's not what we're promoting. We do promote the 3-2-1 approach. So, we do welcome the fact, okay, let's have a copy on Alto, let's look at LTO, let's look at cloud and build the best archive for you that mitigates against this sort of vendor lock-in and the ability to migrate or not have to migrate because you've got a second copy somewhere else. So if a system does disappear, goes end of life, obsolete, then actually, you've got things covered. Open systems. So this is more about the format obsolescence. So people sometimes ask me, should I encrypt my archive? And I'm thinking, no, absolutely not. You're beholden to that encryption key. You lose that key, you lose your archive. Keep everything in an open format. So, for example, at Disk Archive, we have the EX4 file system on every disk. So if something should happen to Disk Archive, we've been around 15 plus years, by the way, so we're not intending to go anywhere. However, you always have to have that mitigation in the back of your mind. What am I going to do? So for us, you can take any disk out of Disk Alto and just mount it either on Linux, Windows, iOS, and you can mount that disk and you can always get access to your content. But obviously, you want to store that content in an open format. So MXF, OP1A, I think, is the choice of many broadcasters in the UK to store in that open format, which was a DPP initiative. MKV is another open format initiative, which I believe the British Film Institute used to store a lot of their content. And that way, you could always read it. You'd always have the players available to view that content. We do a lot with film, DPX sequences, for example. It's a lot of very big files. The best way of storing and archiving those, for example, is to tar them or zip them up into sort of manageable files. But the point is, these are in open formats, non-proprietary formats, that whatever happens to any of your hardware vendors down the line, you can still get access and still read that content. So that's a little bit about sort of the best practices for long-term digital or media preservation. The second thing I was going to talk about was a bit about data repatriation from cloud. So often called declouding. So a bit about the total cost of ownership, a bit about data sovereignty, and some of the financial models behind this. So we know many broadcasters in the UK have put their stuff, their content, their media content into the cloud, primarily on AWS, for example. Um, and even if it's a fixed fee and you can afford this, actually there's some real issues around egress, for example, because all of a sudden you're losing your uncertainty, your certainty of how much you're paying every month. So you can occasionally get bills which are like, oh my goodness, it's much, much bigger than I expected because users have been doing retrieving. A lot of people who are using AI they want to start using AI to do as part of a MAM system where they want to understand what they have. Again, having to retrieve that content can be very expensive. So the alternative is perhaps Glacier. Glacier is a much slower, 12 hours to first byte kind of thing, but you've still got those unpredictable costs in terms of egress charges. So comparing that to Alto, it's a capex cost rather than an opex cost, and I appreciate with cloud, a lot of people, especially accountants, they like the opex costs. They don't want to have assets on their balance sheet for whatever reason, so they really like the opex model. But with Alto, it's a capex. But the other thing, of course, is you might say, well, I don't have a data center. Well, that's fine too. So you can build your own private cloud. We're working with hosting partners in the UK where we can then host an Alto on your behalf. Now, this in terms of total cost of ownership. So at Disk Archive, we have a TCO model where we can put in certain variables of things that you're paying. You can also include things like electricity costs, data center costs, this kind of thing, air conditioning costs, costs of people, how many people you have. And this is based on a 50 petabyte solution. And the big thing you see, the orange line going straight up, so that's S3, AWS 3. So for a 50 petabyte system, even with a discount, we're talking around about $30 million. And quite often they expect this up front as well, by the way. Glacier, much cheaper, but the issue, of course, is accessibility. We have LTO, which starts out when we compare it to Alto a little bit cheaper than Alto. But when you're looking at the total cost of ownership over 3, 5, 7 years, the big issue with Alto, of course, is that you have to migrate between the different LTO versions. So if I'm going from LTO 9 to LTO 10, I'm going to have to buy new media, I'm going to have to buy new drives, and I'm going to have people going through that migration exercise as well. So, of course, there's a big cost for that as well. With Alto, no migration. We don't make the discs. We're not a disc manufacturer. So you are free to basically use the latest and greatest discs from any of the disc vendors, whether that's Western Digital, Fujitsu, whoever. And basically you pick and choose. So as they're bringing out new discs, you just populate the Alto system with that. No migration. So this basically makes the TCO very low. And a bit about data sovereignty. So Mark mentioned this as well. Who was an ally last week? As we know from bitter experience now, they might not necessarily be an ally next week. So in the US, we have the US Cloud Act, which has come to bear already. So sort of law enforcement within the US instructed Microsoft that there was a company in Europe that they had to turn off their tenant. Basically, they're on the sanction list. They had dealings with Russia. I'm not suggesting here Microsoft did anything wrong. They didn't. But the point is, a lot of the business leaders in Europe woke up to the fact that actually they no longer really have control of their content. So sovereignty is a big thing that we have to consider, that your system, your storage can be accessed and turned off at any time. So this really is just a summary of the case for repatriation. One is obviously the unpredictability of costs, the TCO. One is the sovereignty, and then just comparing this to an on-prem capex cost. Actually, it is quite a significant business case to be had for an on-prem or even building your own private cloud. And as we've always said, we're not saying cloud's a bad thing, but perhaps it's this hybrid model that we approach as a 3-2-1 solution. Maybe that's a way to go, something to really consider. Now, the last thing I just want to talk about really is security. So this is obviously cybersecurity, and we talk about ransomware. Now, you might have the best network access control systems, the best authentication systems using multi-factor authentication, something called FIDO2. You might have the best endpoint management where you've got security solutions and secure gateways and all this stuff to your gateway. But any LAN system that's ultimately connected to the internet, even via a secure gateway, can be compromised. And the same goes for cloud solutions as well. Anything with internet access can be compromised. Probably the biggest compromised access is phishing attacks, where people get hold of your credentials. And you might say, hey, I'm really, really careful. But actually, I have worked for an IT security company where the head of IT security, who was always sending us emails about don't get hacked, don't get phished, he actually fell for one as well. So they can be very elaborate, very sophisticated, and they can fall, and you can easily fall for it. Once they have access to your content, they can delete it, they can change it, they can breach it, what have you. The only real way of stopping someone hacking your content is not to put encryption on it. That's bad for your long-term preservation, but it's actually to put it on a shelf. So there's no physical access to the internet. So within Alto, we call this data vaulting. We can take a disk, we could put it on shelf. Obviously, same with LTO tapes. It's a removable media. You can take it out, put it on shelf. In that way, no one can access your content. And in the worst case scenario, you've always got it there. It's always available. With ransomware as well, you might think, well, why can't I just restore a system from my backups? Well, the hackers, they will also attack your backup solution, and they encrypt that as well. And the first you know about it is when you get a ransomware note saying, hey, pay us $3 million, we'll give you your content back, and your backups don't work. So this is my last slide, really, just to talk a bit about disk archive. We have the Alto solution. It's a very scalable solution. It is built on a MAID architecture. So what this means is within each of our chassis, we have, with the Alto 3, for example, we have 60 slots. You can populate these with the latest and greatest disk drives. With the latest 30 terabytes, for example, we could have over 1.5 petabytes in a single 4U rack solution. It's called cold. Basically, we spin up the disks on demand. It takes about 60 seconds. And the point with the cold is as well, it has two major benefits. One is the power. So the disks are not spinning all the time. So the power on these things is actually very small. They're very green solutions. And the second thing, the disks last an awfully long time. So we have systems going back 15 years with 3 terabyte drives, which are still in operation to this date. Disk failures are rare. It's a very highly reliable system. In terms of the TCO, you have 0 migrations. You just add new disk drives over time as you need to. And you can either replicate within the disk Alto, you can use a front end system. We're going to talk a bit about Telestream Diva, which can make multiple copies on multiple layers. So we can, obviously, we're very much pushing that hybrid approach as well. So that's a little bit about Alto and Disk Archive, UK-based company, been around over 15 years. And we're supporting over 60 technological partners, of one of which is Telestream. And on that note, I'm going to hand over back to Mark. Let me start sharing.
Okay, so yes, I'm going to hand over now to Dominic, VP of EMEA and India for Telestream, to take you through what they do.
So I came especially in UK this week thinking that I will find some fresh air coming from France. It's a disaster. But I'm happy to be with Boxer, and thanks for inviting us. So yeah, I'm Dominique Bergeret. I'm the VP Sales EMEA in India. I come from Front Porch, Diva Archive business. We were acquired by Telestream a few years ago. And what I want to do today is really to show you a bit of the evolution of the archive over the years, especially on the software side, taking the experience of what we have with Diva. Just a few words about Telestream. So we have really two parts inside Telestream. The first one is measurement, with products like Tektronix or IQ to monitor streaming. And the other part is a workflow side. So from legacy product like Flip Factory, Vantage, we did build solution around it, either directly developed by Telestream or by acquisition. So on the workflow side, if to understand this very quickly, we have solution to do ingest on the of file on the left side. So it can be file ingest, it can be camera ingest, it can be live feed ingest. And then we move that to Vantage, which is a transcoding system that can do more than transcoding. It can do add insertion of logo, it can do format transition, it can do QC, a lot of things around to change your video to whatever you need. And then the goal is to deliver this. So we have integration with many MAM, PAM, and you recognize some of the name like Avid, but also new players like Mimi or Scoreplay. I will come back to Scoreplay because it's quite interesting. And of course, the goal after that is to store the mezzanine file using Diva. So that's what we do in terms of workflow in a very quick snapshot. So Diva system 10 years ago, well, it was people were saying it's managing LTO, it's an HSM, and it was true. We were mainly managing tech property. We did begin with DLT, now it's LTO, but it was mainly tapes. So it was easy to have a GUI to manage a Diva. It was what we were archiving, what we were restoring, how the jobs were running to move your content in and out the archive. Now, what has evolved over the year? The first thing that did evolve, and Mark, I don't have the control anymore to move the slide. Okay, great. So the first thing, and I think Mark Andrews covered this, is that now there's multiple storage. There are tape library, there's cloud, there's disk, object storage, there's MED, like the Alto solution. And we had to make Diva an intelligent software that can manage this in the best way. But the basic of Diva, and I think 80% of the user of Diva, that's the main thing, is about preservation, asset protection. So we have embedded tool inside Diva to protect the content. So first we can write in LTFS, which is open format. We can do checksum when we archive and we restore, just to check the integrity of the content. It needs to be scalable because you need to add storage, one library, disk, and then maybe cloud. It needs also to be an abstraction layer between any kind of storage and any kind of system that you will be using in a broadcast or more and more in a digital environment. So that's really the mission of Diva. But the other thing which is we see more and more is multi-site. Mark Andrews spoke about the backup of archive. It's really important to be able to have one site and to be able to have another site as a backup, as a disaster recovery. And we see also for big corporations, the need to have local archives that are connected to a main archive and to move content in and out using networks. So multi-site is an important thing that we saw happening. And we have to reconstruct completely our GUI. In fact, we wanted to give a snapshot of what was happening on all the different storage, to have all the alerts coming, the utilization statistics, and even more analytics. How many times we are using drives, how many times this content has been retrieved. It's very important because it helps you to plan your future storage. Do I need to put more disk for fast access or Alto as a deep archive? So that's the kind of things that you are doing with analytics. The thing the most important that we see also is the need to use metadata more and more. So we have embedded inside Diva what we call an archive MAM. So every time we are archiving a high resolution file, we create a proxy, and then people will be able to search, browse, find the content, and retrieve it. So we can do that with a MAM, like Vander with like Dalet, Avid, but we have the possibility to do it on the archive side. And when you do that, the importance is to have metadata. Because if you want to search, the best the metadata are, the better you will get your content. And I'm going to come back on the metadata side and what we are doing with Vantage and also what we are doing with third party. The thing we did is that we wanted to extend the orchestration, the workflow of video, integrating Vantage into Diva. So for example, if companies got all this content in SDR and they want to move it to HDR, directly now from Diva, we can trigger an action to Vantage to do that as a background work. So integrating Diva into Vantage was very important, and it gives us the possibility of, with Vantage to use what we have, what we call practical AI within Vantage. So practical AI within Vantage, it's first a perpetual license that runs on Vantage and that will stay on-prem. We are not putting content in the cloud to do the work. And basically, we can do simple things like speech to text. So every video will extract the audio and get the text. We can also do visual AI, detecting violence, detecting logo, detecting scene, detecting face, and also a number of action with AI for the QC. So when we do that, we create metadata. When we create metadata, we can search through the archive. So that's for the one with Vantage. So let's say that we receive a clip that we need to create the metadata. We will create this workflow with Vantage, and then we can send it to Diva or any other MAM vendors who needs more metadata. So I'm going to show you here a practical usage that we do with AI. So it's for a news corporation where they are receiving news feed. They ingest it with our product live capture. And then we create the iRes that goes to, and the iRes and the proxy that goes to Diva. And we are using this AI to create all the metadata. And we will create TC-aligned claims description, summary of the feed, visual metadata, and we will put markers in the different proxy where we will have all this description. So we are able to search. So this can be passed to Diva, but it can be the same workflow passed to another man. Another thing that we see more and more is new companies like Skylog from Broad Team in France. You have also Scoreplay that are doing this. We are really using AI to create very quickly metadata around sports or for events like Big Brother, things like this. So basically here, what we are doing is that same thing, we are capturing a file, we are sending the resolution to Diva, there is RCT feeds that go to Skylog that will automatically use the AI to do the description, and then they will send this to Diva proxy, and we are able to search. So I think the combination of creating the AI with this tool and being able to move all this metadata to whatever MAM, including the MAM archive or Diva, is a new thing that in the past you had documentalists doing that. And then you can even think about when you have a big, let's say, archive, LTO8, and you want to migrate all the content to a new storage, like a new library or Alto, why not, when you are doing this path of migrating the content, using the AI to extract more metadata? Because maybe some of the content you have described it 5-10 years ago with a documentalist, and using the AI that would add metadata, and when you add metadata, you made it more searchable. So that's something that could be done also from an archive back to a new technology. And then, that's a screenshot of Diva MAM archive, where we have the proxy, we have different markers, and all the metadata that were produced, either by Vantage AI or by third-party metadata, be searchable. So, in a nutshell, the evolution of the archive is that first, metadata is becoming more and more important. Integration with Vantage, QC, and workflow is more also important, but it has to be also the preservation of the content. So all the functionality of preserving your content, migrating to a new technology have to be there. Mark.
Perfect. Thank you.
Welcome.
So, unusually, we have no questions here at the moment. I'll give a couple of seconds here in case anybody wants to pop a question in there. We are just about running to time. But I think we've covered quite a lot in there. I think you can see that the evolution of archive now has moved on a long way from where it was. Just looking at the Diva front end alone, I think probably shows some of that. I will ask a couple of questions as sort of open questions here to the chat. See, one interesting one we found out was that Meta came up with a figure that 40% of licensing revenue is lost due to bad metadata. I don't know if we still think that's true today, or is AI closing the gap? And I guess we had a follow-up question with that said, can AI help decide what's worth migrating at all rather than just migrating everything? Is there a better triage layer, or still do we need people to do that? I don't know if you've got any opinions on that.
I think that could be, I mean, we are the start of AI. We have to be pragmatic. I think metadata creation is one. Something that is very important also is using AI to see, and before coming to your point, to see the content which are on this content on the cloud, and maybe to give some indication of this has been used a couple of times, coming back from the cloud, it's better to put it on disk. So to put some intelligence over the analytics that we are providing. Now to make a choice of do we keep this content, don't keep this content, I think it has to be still a human intervention because it's more about your content, unless your AI becomes really CI of what you're doing, if you see what I mean. So that would be my answer.
Fair enough. And I think one thing we're seeing, actually, we talked about this before we started, was we're actually seeing a different metadata proposition now for coming in off, say, some of the sports applications that are out there. They're generating much more metadata on the way in than we've ever seen before. So the landscape of what's arriving now in an archive is completely different, and the ability to search on it, the ability to monetize it, perhaps will change completely the way we've been used to. I mean, Mark, does monetization, even matter to your customers? We do talk about it, or is preservation and compliance still more important to them?
It's a mixture of both, I think, preservation and compliance. So we also, as well as broadcasters, we have a lot of customers who are museums, and they obviously keeping content for cultural reasons. It has sort of zero commercial value in many ways. But even those who are archiving for commercial reasons, and it's the old adage, you get 80% of queries to 20% of your data. So if you could work out which is the 20% people are always going to access, then obviously you prioritize archiving that more. But obviously, quite often, people don't know. Can AI give us the answer? I don't think it can. I don't think it's that clever. It's hard to predict what people want to bring back. So yeah, it's the 80-20 rule, I think. But yeah, and it just depends on your customer.
And just to perhaps leave with one thought, what's the one thing broadcasters and post-production houses are still getting wrong about archive in 2026?
I think they are not getting it wrong. It's just that what we found out is that broadcasters that built his archive a couple of years ago, he did it with a tool that he had, and it was really broadcast centric. So it was more like we were saying, to take some content back to play out or to edit. I've seen a couple of projects where digital is first before broadcast. So it means that the way they implement it is to give the possibility to search very quickly and to produce a lot of elements for the different social media. And then it makes things easier in terms of indexing through metadata using the tool like Scoreplay and Sport, which I recommend you to look at because it's quite impressive. And to use the AI, the way you have described the AI makes things easier to search. So I think there will be an evolution. If you look at like Dalet, Avid, they are all looking at AI. Their products are really developing around AI. I think it gives you more power, more flexibility to enrich. So I think the broadcaster right now is more preservation or for play out, but they are going to OTT, they are going to, they need also maybe to find a way to enrich their metadata, use more of them.
Perfect. Mark, have you got any thoughts?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, that video that I played at the start of my bit was really there, A, because I thought it was funny, but B, also because it's a kind of reminder that a backup and an archive are two separate entities. I think it's less and less these days people use their backup as an archive or as their archive as a backup. But an archive certainly can be used as part of an archiving strategy. Sorry, an archive can be used as a backup strategy because, if you lost everything and couldn't restore your backup, at least you have your major assets still available within the archive. I think what we see at Disk Archive is this understanding that TCO model, and trying to compare OpEx and CapEx acquisition. And so, for example, with LTO, as a sales guy, I'm pitching Disk Archive and the benefits of using disks with random access and the fact you don't need physical tape drives anymore and this kind of stuff, no more data migration. But the LTO costs to begin with are going to be cheaper. And so for us, it's really an educational thing where we're trying to educate our customers to say, well, look, try and look at a 3-year, 5-year model where actually, as soon as you start counting all the bits that you need for an LTO archive, the cost do add up. Now, as I mentioned, we're not against LTO, we're not against cloud. We really push this hybrid model, but it's sometimes it's just trying to understand people, trying to look at the value rather than the cost. It goes back to that, I think. So that's some of the challenges that we face.
You have some numbers on failure rates of disks in your systems over the last few years, I think.
Yeah, we do, and we've got a very, very large installation. I think it has around about 6,000 disks in there, and it's been in operation for 5 years, I believe. And in that time, we've had 6 disks fail. So there is an average. I think it's 3 to 5% of disks fail, but we come well under that. And that's partly because of our made approach, the fact we only spin up on demand. So actually, we can really stretch the life out of disks. So that again, that's part of the Disk Archive unique selling proposition, I think, in this sort of made environment.
Yeah, it's very cool. I think tape isn't vulnerable. That's, I guess, where we get. We sometimes think that the tape just goes on, but we do know we need to migrate it, and there's lots of moving parts in those systems.
Yeah, no, and it's susceptible to dust and all this kind of stuff. The latest discs you have, they're all impacted with helium. They're sealed in helium, so you can use them in actually quite dusty, quite murky, dirty environments, and they're successful with tape and optical. Actually, yeah, you need very, very clean environments for them to operate correctly.
Perfect. Thanks, Mark. Well, we haven't got any questions come up here. What I can say is if you have anything you'd like to come back to us, you should have our details in the joining mail. We will be following this up with a link to this presentation, plus contact details for us and further links on to Disk Archive Corporation and Telestream. I encourage you to take a look at both. A lot has changed. If you think you know the products from old, you may not know them anymore. And certainly, we're seeing the landscape change so much with our customers that it's definitely worth further conversations. Budgets are stretched, but we are also seeing sources of revenue come out of disaster recovery type areas and InfoSec and IT budgets as well. If we can integrate those in with what we're doing on the media side, everybody's a winner. And of course, coming up soon, we have IBC, where both Telestream and Disk Archive will be. Please contact us if you'd like us to arrange a further demonstration. Other than that, I'd like to say thank you to Mark and thank you to Dominic. We appreciate you being here. Thank you to all of you for attending.